Hi guys. Last time you took notes, you learned a little bit about how molecules are set up to make bigger groups of molecules called monomers. Monomers being the individual Legos or building blocks of bigger molecules called polymers or organic molecules or macromolecules. So today we're going to look at one of the four types of macromolecules. First one we're going to look at is carbohydrates. And as you know, carbohydrates include yummy things like breads and fruits and vegetables, and even in some milks and pastas. So we're going to start out with the function of it. Why do we eat carbohydrates? What is the structure of a carbohydrate, and what are some examples of carbohydrates? So let's start out with the function. The function is whenever I eat any of these yummy things, it's because I want quick energy. So quick energy is the main function of a carbohydrate. But it's also involved in structural purposes as well, so used as a building block for certain molecules in your body. But the main one, if you were to write it down, say on a quiz or something, quick energy would be the one you want to remember. Now the structure of carbohydrates has a lot to do with the name, carbo and hydrate. So carbo refers to carbon, hydrate refers to H2O, water. So the structure of a carbohydrate is that it contains carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, always in a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. So one of these, two of those, and one of those. So here is the basic structure of a carbohydrate. 1 carbon to 2 hydrogens to 1 oxygen. But normally when we see carbohydrates in real life, we see things like this. This is glucose. This is a very important molecule for our body, and it's got 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens, as you can see, in a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. So knowing that, if I give you this molecule right here, what do you think the other two numbers would be? So we have 12 carbons. So how many hydrogens? 24. And how many oxygens? 12. So you can do that for pretty much anything. You can go C4, H8O4. So you can come up with any formula for a carbohydrate that you want. Some examples of carbohydrates: we have yummy sugars, starches, which are just big long chains of sugars, cellulose, which is mostly found in vegetable materials. It's what makes them kind of crunchy, and something called chitin. Chitin is a molecule that is found in the exoskeleton of lots of arthropods, so bugs and crustaceans and things like that. It's kind of what makes them crunchy when you step on them. Alright, so that is the basics of carbohydrates. There are two main groups of carbohydrates. First one we call simple carbohydrates because they are very simply put together. They're basically monomers and dimers. So if we think of, remember the smiley faces from the previous one? So simple carbohydrates are just monomers or dimers. Dimer just means two of them stuck together. Complex carbohydrates means a whole bunch of them strung together. So the monomer strung together in a big long chain makes up a complex carbohydrate. Now there's a special word that we use to refer to carbs, and that is the word saccharide right here. Okay, so remember how we had the word mono and then mer. Mer just meant the unit. Well, the unit for a carbohydrate is a saccharide. So we're going to take out the mer word and we're going to put in the unit for that particular thing. So monosaccharide. Dimers become disaccharides, and polymers become polysaccharides. So the little smiley face is called a saccharide. So there are lots of examples of smiley faces. The most common one is glucose. So you can imagine that glucose is the monomer of the carbohydrates, and fructose would be also a smiley face, but now it's just a different color. So they're the same. They're both monomers, they're both building blocks, they're both examples of saccharides, but they're just slightly different enough to make them different. And then we have another one down here called galactose, and so he's basically just a different color. And so I can put them together in lots of different arrangements. I can put a galactose together with a glucose and make something, or I can throw a fructose on it and make something else. So they're all monomers. There's different kinds of monomers, just like there's different types of Lego blocks. They come in different colors, they come in different shapes and sizes, but they're all the building block. They're the basic unit of making a bigger structure out of Legos. Now, of course, we're not going to use smiley faces. We're actually going to use the actual structure. This is glucose right here. Glucose is a six-sided ringed structure. And so here's one of the carbons, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Because remember, glucose is C6H12O6. So there's the 6 carbons. One of the O's is right there. So typically, what we do whenever we're drawing glucose or representing glucose, we do a little six-sided structure, put a little G in the middle of it. Fructose was another simple one right here. It is also a 6 carbon sugar, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It is also a ring, so we can also draw it like this, but we would just put an F in the middle. And then this one, again, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbons. So it also is a six-sided structure, and we would just put like a GA in the middle to represent it as galactose. So usually whenever we're drawing the monomer or the monosaccharide of a carbohydrate, it's typically drawn as a six-sided figure. Okay, so those are the monomers, the monosaccharides of carbohydrates, and they are called simple. Now, complex carbohydrates would include things like, oh, never mind, let's go to dimers first. Okay, dimers, disaccharides. So di, then we cross out the mer and put saccharide in its place, which means we're talking about carbohydrates. So I take 2 monomers and smush them together, and that makes a dimer. So here is glucose right here, and here is fructose. But when I smush them together, they become sucrose. Now, sucrose is what we're used to because that is table sugar. So when we eat sugar, we're not eating glucose, we're eating sucrose, which is actually 2 sugars stuck together. See, they're holding hands right here. And do you remember, what is it that causes a drop of water to fall out and leaves you with an oxygen in the middle? What kind of process did that? Do you remember? Okay, we lose water, so we dehydrate it. Oh, dehydration synthesis, because we're losing water, dehydration, and we're synthesizing or putting together the two things. Now, if you like to eat Whoppers, the middle of Whoppers has malt sugar in it, which is called a maltose. And as you can see, it is made by sticking together, if you look at the structures, 2 glucoses. So if I put 2 glucoses together, there they are holding hands in the middle, I have maltose, which is an example of a disaccharide, dimer, disaccharide, because it's made out of 2 monomers. So that's the same as me going, okay, glucose plus fructose, come on now, or me going glucose plus glucose. They're both dimers, but what makes them up makes them slightly different. Okay, then we have polymers. So I take out the word mer and put saccharide in its place, polysaccharide, which just means 3 or more monomers joined together. There's a couple different examples of it. One is starch, which is what makes food taste yummy. It's in bread and pastas. And basically starch is just a big long chain of glucoses. So glucose, 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 okay? That's starch. And here's a picture of it right here, all twisted. So it's still a chain, they just twisted it up like that. So that's an example of a polymer or a polysaccharide because they're made out of the individual monomers. Another one is cellulose. That's the one I said that was found in plants in their cell walls. It is also made out of glucose, but if you notice what's different about them is that the way they're arranged. See this little extra thing right here? Okay? Well, what they did is they flipped it around. Top, bottom, like that. That allows them to stick almost sideways with each other, and they can form little bonds like this with them as well. What that does, it makes them super duper strong. So cellulose is what makes plants crunchy, is because of the way that the glucose molecules stick together and make up the cell walls. Okay, and the third example is glycogen, which is something that we use. We take glucose from starch or sugars, and then we go ahead and start making chains of them, little branched chains, and then that makes them very complex. So now I've got a single chain, starch, but now if I start making other chains sticking off of it, now I've made a very complex molecule. And this complex molecule is stored in our liver and released whenever we need energy. So it's fourth period and you're kind of hungry, but you can't eat yet. Well, inside of your liver, glycogen will start chopping off a glucose at a time and giving it to your body, so that way you still have a source of energy, because without it you would pass out due to lack of energy to the brain. So good thing we have that glycogen. Okay, so starch, single chain, cellulose, single chains that are cross-linked together, and glycogen, which is just a big long branched chain of glucoses. Alright, now how do we use the carbs in our body? So once we eat them, what do? Well, remember, they come to us as a big old chain of glucose, and our body can't use it like that. They need to break it down into the individual pieces. So before we can use them, we need to break them down. So polysaccharides need to be broken down into monosaccharides before we can actually use them. So do you remember, what process is it that erases or gets rid of the bond in between and makes them individual pieces? So that was from the previous notes with the two little smiley faces, and then we used a drop of water to get in there and cleave them in half. Do you remember that one that was called? It's called hydrolysis, because I'm breaking the water, or I'm lysing, splitting the water in half. So hydrolysis reactions are what go on inside of your stomach when you're digesting your food. So the glucose that we eat, because it's already broken down and I don't need to break it down any further, that's why it provides quick energy, because I don't need to digest it. It goes straight to our body. That's why you get a little hyper after eating a candy bar, because that pure sugar goes straight into your body. Starch, the big old chains, because we have to spend the time breaking it down, they provide longer spouts of energy for us. Glycogen, because it's stored in our liver and also our big muscles, that one is for like marathon runners. You know, they can't really eat while running. I don't know if they do. I'll have to ask you marathoner guys. But if we can break down the glycogen while they're running, it can provide long-term energy. So this is even longer energy than starch does. Then we have cellulose, structural support in plant cells. We have a hard time breaking it down. So basically it goes through us as fiber. And as you guys know, fiber is good for cleaning out the bowels. And so a lot of fiber goes in one way and comes out pretty much the same exact way, which is why, well, corn. I'm just going to stop there. Just corn. Yeah. Okay. And then we have chitin right here. It makes an exoskeleton of many arthropods, and like I said, it's what makes them crunchy when we step on them. It's their bones, basically. It's their bones on the outside of their body. Alright, the last thing is, this is just a little graphic. You don't need to write this down, but I thought it was a good way to kind of represent it. So carbohydrates come in two chunks, complex and simple. Simples are sugars, either mono or disaccharides. Remember that bird I told you that I found? Anybody know whose it is? Because it's back there chirping and it's really bugging me right now. So the sugars, we have the monosaccharides, like glucose, fructose, and galactose. And then we have the disaccharides, like sucrose, maltose, and lactose. Lactose is milk sugar. So those of you who are lactose intolerant, which means you can't break down the dimer. So you have the dimer in you, which you need to break down, but if you're lactose intolerant, you can't, and that's what makes you sick. Sucrose and glucose glucose and fructose make sucrose, glucose and galactose make lactose, two glucoses make maltose. Okay, simple sugars, quick energy. On the other side, complex, starches, like pasta and bread. Good sources are potatoes and bread, and they provide you with glucose. Dietary fiber, two kinds. The kind you can digest and the kinds you can't. The kinds you can, lentils, beans, oatmeal, and something called psyllium. It's basically the outside of wheat, and it'll break down and give you glucose. Insoluble fiber, good sources are bran flakes, bran, all that good stuff. Can't digest it. If you can break it down, you will get glucose, but you only get a little bit out of it. You don't get much return from it. So, as you can see, it all comes down to glucose. So if I were to say what's the most important carbohydrate, glucose, because it provides energy for our body. So we break down all these to turn them into these, which is really just these. So we can't do anything unless it's in simple form. Alright, oops, I do believe, yes, that is the last slide. So you guys are done in under 15 minutes. Yay! Alright, so keep an eye out for the next one. It's going to be on protein. So I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.